Alright. So, this is me, little pixely me. Apparently I'm not the official Nick Moore. Disappointing. So this is the channel. The handle is Nick Moore 9881. Ooh, subscribers have gone up. 501 videos. That's a lot of
Do you
videos.
get paid when your video is being watched?
Hmm?
Do you get paid? That's a
Not
weird
enough
one.
for it to be consequential. Oh my goodness, I think the ad revenue I'm getting at the moment is something like between 2 and 7 cents per day.
That's
So,
good.
yeah, well,
It's better than nothing.
it's better than nothing, yeah, but you know, if you take a look at most, like the view count on most of these things, you know, it's kind of like, they do generally, you know, actually that nearly 400 is pretty good actually for one of mine. Yeah, view count is kind of, oh my god, I look like my father, alright. The view count is, this is kind of a low end one, but normally each video will pull between, you know, 20 and 100 on an average day. So it's been pretty high lately actually, but yeah, it's interesting too. Sometimes you get people watching the back catalog a little bit too, which is kind of fun. The algorithms picked up the channel to a certain extent, but yeah, that's the channel. I have made a playlist for us, which I believe will be there once there's at least one video in it, which is currently waiting to be published. So when that video gets published, I will make the announcement, and you can review it and watch it, etc. Sound good? Wonderful. So, test this week. I'm sorry I'm a little behind on marking for this class. I was like sick for a couple of days last week and that put me behind, but I was behind before that, so you know, it is what it is, but I'm burning the midnight oil to try to get all the marking in this week. I'm determined that all my marking will be caught up by the end of the week. And that's not gonna happen because I got this huge assignment for the other class that I have to grade, so. Anyway, this class, at least, I will certainly have your grades caught up before your writing test, so you know where you're standing. So,
What test do you think?
which test am I using?
No,
Or-
test two, so can we use cheat sheet?
I let you have one on the last one, so I'll let you have one on this one.
Oh, thank God.
Is it a written format, Dr. Moore, that we did last time?
Yes, yeah, that's my intention, and I'm gonna have to figure out something with Steve. We'll see if Steve can't make it in for one class. Come on, Steve, make it in for one class. It's a test.
It's gonna be on Friday?
Yes, yeah. Yep, it'll be on Friday, same deal as last time. You guys should have a much better idea of what to expect for this one, having written the last one. Generally, I try to keep things consistent that way. But yeah, that's generally the form. So it'll be the same as last time. We'll take 2 hours to write the test. Probably around the same number of questions, you know.
25? Was 50?
50 points,
50
but
points, yeah.
I think there were something on the order of 20 questions, 20-some questions. So, you know.
So the topic we covered after the test is gonna be there, not before.
Well, this is kind of the thing about programming, is there's really no way to, like, I can't not have if statements, right? If statements were a major part of the last test. There's like, because everything is so cumulatively, it's so cumulative naturally in programming, like especially an introductory course like this, there's no way I can test you without using your knowledge of variables and loops and if statements. So you should not have to study that stuff explicitly, because hopefully just being here in this class, you've had to exercise that knowledge enough. If it's something you're still struggling with, I certainly recommend reviewing it. But certainly the questions will be about the material that we have covered since the midterm, since the last one, right? So those topics are, anybody care to guess?
Static,
Oh, certainly, yeah.
Global variable, it's gonna be arrays, it's gonna be about,
Loops.
loops, yeah, for loops.
Yep, that wasn't really tested very much on the midterm last one, so you can expect a fair amount of it on this one coming up. The thing about loops is like, they only really start to shine once you have some arrays to work on with them, you know? But, yeah, so in general, you may expect loops, arrays, classes / objects. We can break that into a couple of subcategories.
Constructor.
Game, object, creation / destruction. Yeah, constructor, methods and methods, and the constructor. Creating objects
Prefab.
and using them. Not prefabs, although that's not what I'm talking about here, although that's, you know. I kind of think of creating a prefab as kind of like to the side of what I'm interested in testing you on, because I'm mostly interested in testing you on the code.
Draw.
Right? So creating objects and using them means instantiating classes, right? Using the new keyword. So, you know, enemy X equals new enemy. Another way to say that would be calling a constructor, right? Game object creation and destruction. Do you know what I mean when I'm talking about that?
It's the draw method and the destroy method.
What's inside of them? What's inside the draw method? What actually creates the game object? There's a specific function that you should know how to use. It starts with an I.
A loop, array, no,
Nope,
no,
nope.
no, int, the instantiate and,
Instantiate.
yep,
Yep. So
okay.
instantiate and destroy.
And destroy,
this is kind of related to creating classes and objects in this sense. You know, class X is equal to new class, right? This is a reference variable, right? It's a reference to an object. You should understand the difference between reference variables and other types of variables.
That's it?
You wish. Wishful thinking. No, because we also covered inheritance. Association / composition and static. And that is everything that the test is on. Incidentally, if you understand reference variables, then you understand association and composition. Because all it means for one class to be associated with another is that it holds a reference variable for that other class. So the classes this week will be reviewed.
On Thursday?
Today and Thursday, we're going to be reviewing these topics.
Perfect.
Probably on the board to start off with. Yes?
What group statements are included?
Statements?
I mean the loops statements, there are different types of loop statements.
Oh, whichever one you like best.
Four, yeah.
For loops are good.
Each.
You should know how each of them are used, but I generally like, let me put it to you this way. The reason that different types of the reason that different types of loops exist is to make different types of tasks easier. If you see a situation on a test and you use the incorrect loop, right? You can still write a solution which is fully correct, but it will take longer, right? So the penalty that you're paying is not in marks, it's in test writing time. All right?
Okay.
Got it.
So you are going to cover all types of loop statements? For, while, do while, for each.
I'm going to present you with situations which require loops. It's going to be up to you to determine which loop you believe is most appropriate for the situation. So I'm not going to do one loop on do whiles, one question on do whiles, one question on whiles, one question on fors, and one question on for each. I'm not going to do that structure.
So if whoever comes with a faster way, it's better for them, but all of them is correct, basically.
Well, all of them can be used correctly. Some of them, it's harder to use them correctly in a situation they are inappropriate for. A good example is if you're doing some sort of simple numeric counting thing, right? Like, print out every second number between 100 and 200, for example. Using a for loop means that your incrementer is built into the loop header itself. You're more likely to remember it. If you use a while loop in that situation, and you forget to increment the loop variable, that is a mistake. that's actually a pretty bad mistake with a while loop, because that results in that's an error that crashes the whole program, right? So, under those sorts of circumstances, it's better for you to use a for loop over a while loop. That being said, if the condition that you're trying to check for is not numeric, say, we don't do so much of this in this class, but in other classes, you often see loops that wait for the user to input something correct. Like, it's like enter a number between 1 and 10. If you enter 17, it will prompt you again, enter a number between 1 and 10, right? That type of loop, the condition for that is not, it's not related to a loop, like a counting loop variable, right? There would be no I++ at the bottom of it, right? Because the user is determining how many times that loop runs by ignoring what's the requirement for the input, right? So in that kind of situation, you absolutely want a while loop and not a for loop, right? So, absolutely. If you're doing something with a data structure, like an array, using a for each loop can be less hassle, but you also have to understand what's going on with the loop variable, right? Sometimes it's a little more straightforward to understand how the regular for loop is operating, because it's just using the numeric indexes that we use sort of in regular programming, right? So, each type of loop is a tool, and you will need to use these tools on you'll need to, I'm testing you not only to figure out do you know how to use at least one of these tools, but it's also a test to see if you know which tool is right for which job. And it's kind of again, it's a soft thing. I'll accept correct answers that will execute in code. Basically, that's more or less my standard for grading most of the time, especially in introductory classes. If you can get code that will execute without errors, then I'm happy. I'm not particularly concerned how you arrive there, right? Because I understand you're still learning, right? There's this thing in martial arts. They say that there are very few beginners, lots and lots of people of intermediate skill, and very few masters. And that's because when you don't know anything, everybody knows the same amount of nothing, right? Once you have acquired a certain amount of skill, that's where people sort of diversify into their different styles. But by the time you've been doing it for a long time, all of the efficiencies that you find, everyone else is converging on the same efficiencies, right? So right now you're sort of in the phase where you should be mastering the basics and developing your initial style of coding, right? And I don't want to be too restrictive, in that respect. So that's what I have to say on the subject of loops and which ones you should know. You should know all of them that you find useful. If I were to pick one and stick with it, I would pick the for loop is a really good one to know. Let's put it that way. Pretty much, as you can tell with the actual programming examples we've done in class, for loops will handle most situations. Good. Any other questions?
Yes, I do. Just a moment.
Is it okay to make some little chitty papers.
Yes, you are permitted one double-sided 8.5 by 11 crib sheet, just like on the last one. Yes.
Dr. Moore, can you go with a little bit of example with each topic that would refresh our memory a little bit? Like,
Which would you like me to start with?
loops, maybe?
Okay. So, loops. What kind of loop do you want me to do?
So give us example with one big statement that everything is correct to use, but the faster would be something that is for each or for maybe.
Okay. Do you mind if I pull arrays into this example?
Yeah, that's perfectly fine.
Because that way I get to demonstrate the for each loop as well.
So, is that thing on? Is that thing on?
Oh, no.
I believe it is. Did I press the button? Uh-oh. Yeah, we're recording. Yep. Phew. All right. Test reviews. Interesting. If you like open it in Explorer and open like from right clicking in Explorer, it skips the stupid splash and like the loading for everything. That's useful to know. All right. So let's imagine we have an array. Int array x is equal to 10, 9, 7, 6, 1. Curly brace. There we go. Now, let's say that we wanted to compute the sum of this array and output that to console. First method, while loop. Second method, do while loop. Third method, for loop. Fifth method, for each. So, when we write a for loop, we need to declare a loop variable. The loop variable in all cases, for all of these loops that have a loop variable, the loop variable will be the indexes of the data structure. Now, where does an array start numbering? What's the first index number? 0. 0 index. Very good. So, I is equal to 0, while I is, now we come to an important point. While it is currently true that this array has 10 elements in it, one of the things that we very, very often like to do is to set the loop dynamically based on the size of the data structure rather than hard coding that value. We prefer to say while I is less than x dot length, rather than saying while I is less than 10. Right? This is because if we change x using this method, we have to change every position in the code where we use that property. Whereas if we say x dot length, all of those changes are made for us automatically. So far, so good?
Yep.
So, because we wish to take the sum, let's just declare the sum. Sum is plus, yep, I'm doing something pretty basic, right? There we go. So the sum equals the sum plus x at I, right? This symbol, what's it mean?
So, is,
It means assignment plus addition. I also have assignment plus subtraction. I also have assignment plus multiplication. I have assignment plus division. These are all equivalent to that construction. You just take that, pop it in there. It's a compound operator. It's not necessary for all of you to use it. Similarly to loop style, I don't care whether you use this construction or the plus equals. Whichever you remember, whichever works, that's good enough for me. Okay? Generally, people, it's considered more high skill to use the combo operator just because it's like fewer keystrokes and, like this is the more beginner way of doing it, but you're all beginners, so don't be ashamed of being a beginner, basically. Next, we have to, there's one thing that we have to do. One thing completes this loop. What is it? I minus minus? Yeah. Can I disable this? I'm getting really annoyed by it. Because it's just jumping on, it's just trying to teach my lesson for me. Visual Studio Code. Remove autocomplete. Disable. Oh, and that's not Visual Studio Code, Visual Studio. IntelliSense. That's not the same thing though. Tools. Options. IntelliCode, there we go. No, 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 no. Okay, IntelliCode, is that what they're calling it? Yes, that's it, okay, it's done. Good, because it's different from the autocomplete, right? Like the autocomplete is the drop-down menu that pulls up, that shows you what all the methods are. So, all right. Okay. Anyway, so yeah, without this line, it's an infinite loop, right? Do you know why it's an infinite loop without that line? Because that'd be a good test question.
Sorry, you say something?
Without this line, it's an infinite loop. Why?
It's never incrementing, it's always at the same level, and it just keeps going and going and going and going.
Precisely. I is never modified inside of the loop. Therefore, this condition will always come out true. I will always be less than the length of the array because it's never increasing, right? It'll never go over that boundary. So, good. So that's how you do it in a while loop. Now, let's do it in a do while loop. Do, grab the content, paste, while, there we go. So the only difference between the while loop and the do while loop,
It's reverse, basically.
yes, it tests its condition once you reach the end of the loop rather than once you reach the beginning of the loop. This means the do while loop executes at least once. While a while loop may not execute at all. If the computer finds a while loop, tests the condition, and that condition comes out false on the first test,
It's not gonna run.
it's not going to run it at all, any of it, not even once. Make sense? Question? Okay. For loops. A for loop is a while loop with all of these bits condensed down into one line. For int I is equal to 0, I is less than x dot length, I plus plus, yes. And then some plus equals x of I. Oh, it's so much nicer without that stupid thing having a conversation with the stupid AI. I hate it. Incidentally, another thing that you can do, I don't know if I've shown this to you yet, but this is kind of a fun thing. You can actually omit the curly braces and put it at the end of the line if you want to. So you can actually squeeze the whole thing on one line. But, you know, that's not required. All right. Now, the for each loop. For each int q in x, sum plus equals q. So of the four of these, the for each loop is shortest.
But you have to declare a variable.
Yes. you declare a new loop variable inside of,
For each.
yes, inside of the for each loop, which,
Takes a limit.
yeah,
Value of I basically. No.
no, it's
Value
not,
of I and X at the same time.
it's a replacement for x at I,
At
not I,
yeah, X and I is.
right? So, it's much more difficult to get a for loop, or a for each loop, into an infinite loop than it is for a for loop. The boundary condition here is the actual size of the data structure. So x dot length is baked into this one, right? It takes each element in sequence and it stops when it runs out of elements. This is, again, this is the version that has the computer handle the most for you, right? Of all of them though, it's also the least flexible, right? It does one thing very, very well, but it doesn't do other more general things. So, to some degree, we have these in order of generality, right? All loop problems can be solved by a while loop. All of them, yeah.
It's good to have.
The what? Yeah, the while, like if you memorize only one loop, it should be the while loop. Because all loop functions can be performed with a while loop. Do while loops are a cousin, but, you know, I'll put it to you this way. The while loop is more general than the do while loop because the do while loop executes 0 or more times, right? The regular while loop executes zero or more times, not 1 or more times. So the case where it executes 1 or more times is included in the 0 or more times, right? It's like this is a superset of cases. So, most general, slightly less general, right? Another way of putting it is you cannot write a loop, you cannot write a do while loop that never executes the middle. This one can, so it handles more cases, right? The for loop handles a large number of cases, but really only ones where you're dealing with numeric indexes, right? The condition here is the same condition in an if statement. It's that general, right? Literally any condition can be put here, right? Now the condition here is also that general, but if you're going to have something completely unrelated to an index, there's no reason to have used a for loop in the first place, right? So when you have a numeric index, that's where you should be using a for loop. It's more specific to that, and it's better at that specific thing, but you do lose generality, right? The for each loop is the most specific type of loop of all 4 of these, right? You lose the most generality, but it's also the best for its specific task.
Can you explain it more?
Sure. So it's very short, but it only applies to situations where you're using a data structure. If you don't have a data structure, you can't use the for each loop, right? So having a data structure is a more restrictive thing than needing some sequence of numbers, right? needing a sequence of numbers is a more specific thing than just a general Boolean condition. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So far, so good?
Here, can I take a picture of that?
Certainly. Right. My goodness, this 1 hour class is short. What else? You had a question and you never got to ask it.
No, I recount my statements. No, the reason, Dr. Moore, I was looking earlier at, just some of the structure, of the test. I know you mentioned to change it, but it was just giving some of the learning outcomes, which I think we've already identified there anyway, so we've got everything,
So interfaces we didn't cover.
that's the only thing I think. We've got inheritance, modeling, but we've got composition, aggregation, we didn't really do, that's kind of the same thing as.
Appropriately, when modeling an object-oriented problem, just means writing code.
Okay.
Yeah. So that's just highfalutin math speak.
Yes.
When you, like, the code is a model. It's a mathematical model of a problem, a real world problem, right? But, you know, it's not useful to think about code that way outside of grad school. So I haven't been talking about it like that.
No.
Yeah.
It just mentions also selecting correct and appropriate identifier names.
Oh,
What is that referring to?
oh yeah, I can, yeah, that's, so selecting appropriate identifier, first of all, what's the definition of an identifier? Do we know what an identifier is?
The name that you're calling an object or
Yeah, so
the name you're assigning to something?
identifiers get light blue here. It's a specific class of thing. So sum is an identifier, x is an identifier, I is an identifier. Identifier is just the name that's used officially for like a variable name. That's an identifier. The term is a little bit more general than that because identifiers also include function names and class names, right? So basically what all that's saying is, do you have common sense when you name variables, methods, and classes, right? For example, it would not make any sense to call this cheese, right? And to call this puppies, unless the question you were being asked was about cheese and puppies, right? So it's kind of a silly point, but believe it or not, you do run into people who have no idea what they're doing every once in a while, who will literally actually use random words for variable names and like method names and that sort of thing. And that's considered extremely bad programming, so that's why that's in there.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, that's an output, so we got that.
Yeah.
So where are you seeing all of this, because I couldn't see it?
If you go under week 10, test 2, summary and instructions.
That's going to say a number of wrong things as well, like the test is online and stuff and such. I need to rewrite this course. I need to be made course writer. Throw it in the bin, start fresh. That's my thing. It needs slides. Like, I don't know what the institutional phobia around here is for slides, you know?
Slides with examples.
Slides with examples in them, yes,
Please,
yes.
yes.
The problem is, of course, that like making slides takes a frickin' long time. And I unfortunately, I can't do it while teaching, you know, 2 other sections and, you know, all the rest of it. But, like, the perspective of the union is if the college wants slides, they can damn well pay for slides and give us time to make them, right?
Are you in a union, Dr. Moore?
Yeah, all the professors are in a union.
What?
Yeah, we're unionized. We go on strike occasionally.
Come on.
Why?
I don't know, I never thought that professors or anyone that's in
Teachers are.
Yeah,
I
Did
know,
they
but this,
go on
we're at a
strike a
different
few
level
years
here
ago?
now.
yeah.
We're at a different
Teachers
level,
went
I
on strike
never
a few years
imagined
ago.
Mhm.
that the professors, PhDs would be in a union. The teaching union?
Professors in universities aren't.
Okay, that's where
Yeah.
that's where it's coming from, I never realized there was a.
I believe that they aren't. But college professors, generally speaking, are.
Well, then that makes sense, they should, for you to do it.
I mean, anybody who is sufficiently, you know, minded in any profession should be entitled to the right to form a union. The problem you have with university professors is that they're so, like the teaching and the research aspects of it are so, like,
Protected?
No,
it requires a different mindset. Like, they're hyper competitive with each other, so like getting 2 professors to cooperate on anything is like, you know?
It's not possible.
Yeah, so, and also, like, the idea that you would ask a university professor to pause his research in order to go on strike for a couple of weeks,
It's not possible.
well, it's ludicrous because the professor knows, like professors are ultimately, I gotta get to my next class. Professors, the value that a professor brings to a university is ultimately measured in the number of papers they produce, right? Like, that's how, like, promotions and things are determined.
And plus also the professors are, you know,